Hi guys, it's Evian here. I hope you've all had good weeks so far. I spoke to Andy on Monday about the role, and Verti sounds like a really cool company. I did a master's in medical product design, so I have a medical background, and I'm really interested in that aspect within Verti. It's something that really piqued my interest when I first heard about the company. So before I jump in, I'd just like to give you an overview of my approach. When I'm doing these redesign projects, I usually find it useful to do a brand review and interpret the design language that you have going on the website. So then I'll move on to the actual review where I analyze the dashboard and the key problems that I found with it. And then I'll walk you through my prototype, which will address those issues that I found, as well as looking at some of the branding. So I had a look at the Verti website to see what the design language was really. The key things I found were the colors. So you have the dark navy blue, and then contrast the punchy mint, and then some white. And I think these three colors work really well together. I think it actually has quite a medical feel that's slightly newer, less outdated, which is good. Some of the imagery looks really good as well, and the font as well. The Ubuntu font, it looks really nice, and I really like the way you've done. You've given things a lot of breathing room, a lot of space, and it feels quite open. And I really like that approach. So what I often do when I'm trying to work on these brands is try to take out certain key elements of the identity and see if it still holds. So if you take out the Verti logo and some of the Verti words throughout the homepage, does it still say, oh, this is Verti, this is something kind of unique and different from other companies? And I mean, personally, I don't think it does. I think that it does feel like a lot of other companies have this kind of similar styling, and I think there's maybe some points within the website that you could bring out and accent and emphasize a bit more within the brand. So once I dug deeper into the website, I found a few images that really stood out to me, and they felt quite cool, especially when used in conjunction with what you already have on a website. I'm really liking this kind of neon effects, these duotone images with the warm pink on one side and the cool blue on the other side, and then this bringing back in the mint as well, and this topographical relief map pattern that you have, and that works really well, I feel, with the lifestyle images. I think against the dark backgrounds, I think this feels quite unique. I mean, I've seen these used elsewhere separately, but not in conjunction with what you already have on a website. So I think that's something that could be explored. So I've put together a mood board of these different illustrations that I feel were a bit more exciting, a bit more enticing, relating to the photography that I found on the website. So usually at this stage, I would talk to stakeholders and try to match up with them and say like, oh, is this the design language that really is speaking to Verti? And like work through it with them, and together we'd find an end goal. But in this case, I've had to do it alone. So I was trying to think about the target audience, and I realized it's probably more the younger generation of doctors and surgeons and nurses coming into the field, and they're a bit more starry-eyed. They're a bit more like aware of things. It's maybe not going to be the people who have been in the field for years and years, and who are maybe slightly stuck in their ways, and like things the way they are. So if it was me and I was a junior doctor, all starry-eyed and getting into the field and getting really excited by everything, I'd want to be using a platform that kind of matched up with that kind of energy that I felt like I had. And I feel like a lot of the design language on this page speaks to that. So if you look at this illustration that's already on the homepage, it feels quite old, a bit outdated. It does feel medically, but I don't think it really sits in conjunction with the rest of the Verti brand. Whereas this, I feel like it would sit quite happily within the brand and actually add a level of depth to the style of what you already have going on. So I think this bike really speaks to that brand as well. Some of the punchy colors along with those like slightly muted, warmer colors, and the duotone going on as well, like that matching up with this picture. So you can see I've also got some motion design going on, and I really like motion design. It's something I'm looking to kind of pursue a bit more, mostly in the UI sense, but I think just bringing in, working with like videographers and motion graphic artists, it can really take a brand from quite cookie cut to make it something quite unique. So moving on to the UI review, I haven't really gone too deep and analysed every little bit. I've just kind of called out some of the main things. So my first impression of this, the courses dashboard, was that it's quite stark, quite boxy, and quite plain as well. So there's not really any colours going on. At first glance, it's not really Nothing really pulls out from anything else either. In terms of accessibility, I don't know if it would meet necessarily all the criteria, especially like seeing how those bounding boxes work. Going on to other issues I found. My first one is spacing. I mean, this is usually the first thing I'm always looking at. So like connection of elements is usually made by the proximity of those components. And so if you actually look on this, when I first looked at this dashboard, I didn't realize that this part over here was related to this. I thought these were kind of all functions part of this module. I didn't really understand what was happening. I've even spoken to a few other people just to see what their impressions were, and got them to have a little look at it just to see what their first impressions were of it. And a lot of people were kind of like, once I understood it as well, I tried to kind of guide them through it, and they seemed confused as well. Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of validate your own first impressions as well. I can see you guys have gone for a nearly full width design style, and most of the time that works really well. But in terms of dashboards, I've seen it quite a lot actually. I don't know if it necessarily works very well because, again, on these like desktop screens, it pulls information really far apart from each other, and we've like left aligned and right aligned things. So it often makes better to stack it in a more like a grid format or like a card format. Also, if there was about like 20 different simulations within this module, I think you'd probably be finding it hard to figure out which one lines up with what. So if you're looking at the 17th one, you might accidentally click this, turn off the assessment for the 16th one. So moving on to number 2, the icons were dissimilar. So since writing this, I've actually kind of had a rethink about this, and I kind of understand why you've done it. So what I understand is you've chosen 2 different symbols for delete, because this one deletes the module and this one only removes a simulation from the module. And I guess you don't want to convey to the user that you're probably thinking that the user might be worried that this is going to actually delete the simulation from the interface. So from that perspective, I can understand that why you might go for a different symbol. Personally, I would still probably use the bin and maybe just have a different tooltip when you hover over it. So maybe this one just says remove from module, and this one says delete module when you hover over. And I mean, that's like one kind of way to approach it. So moving on to the settings, I didn't actually know these settings were here when I first saw it. I just thought you had to like open up the module to see more details of what was in there. Classically, the settings are on the far right hand side, and the chevron would be on the right hand side as well, actually, if it was like a slightly smaller card. But if you were trying to expand this, you'd be probably clicking on the title or maybe somewhere in the center. So it would make more sense to be putting the chevron next to the title or maybe in the center. And then, so the pass grade. I didn't actually understand what this was for a while until I read the notes a bit more and realized that, this must be the pass grade. It needs just definitely need some text to explain what that is, because I don't know if that first time users are going to really understand what it is. So going on to the prototype, I'm going to talk about 2 points as I go through this: accessibility and branding. And I think I'm going to start with branding. I matched up the gradient to what I saw in this image, and I felt like that was really cool. You don't often see that in user interfaces these days. I thought it worked really well with this kind of vibrant image as well, and there's dark tones. And so it goes up to this really dark navy. I brought in an illustration that I thought was really interesting. So at first I thought about using this illustration, but I thought there was a bit too much going on, and I really wanted to kind of dull that down and make the focus more about the functions of the site, really. And I think it still kind of speaks to that audience of like that kind of interesting, you understand the context of like, this is kind of future focused learning. It's not this like typical way of approaching it. So going on to the actual components, you can see I've put this edge glow on a lot of the components because I felt like this really brought them out from the background as well, because I've got a shadow going on with a dark background that kind of blends it in, and it kind of makes it hard to distinguish where the edge is. But if you put this edge glow on, that kind of solves that problem, as well as makes it look a bit like neon. It makes it feel a bit more futuristic. So as you can see, I went for the card format that I was talking about before. I think this really makes sense for condensed information like this. You can see what functions are related to what, and even if you had just one card here, you would understand how these things worked. So if I click this, it will open up the simulations as well as open up the editing capabilities for that card. And then it's kind of like a discover sort of understanding. You don't need to describe everything that happens. You click something and you understand, okay, that's what that does, and now I understand that. As long as it's like semi-intuitive, it should make sense. So I've kind of gone for, within the simulations, as you can see, I've gone for the punchy mint. So an issue with the old interface is that everything feels very flat and interconnected. With everything being grey, it's quite hard to distinguish different things from one another. Whereas the Mint over here is very obviously quite different from the dark interface of the cards, and so you can quickly see that there's different things that happen within here. So this is a next stage down. Here's the simulations. So with the simulations themselves, I've put them into kind of like an open plan card format. So they're broken open, but they still work in the same way. So having seen the cards beforehand, you'd understand kind of how these cards work as well. You're kind of building the design language as you go. I've created the design language with these initial cards. Now I've taken it to the next stage with these ones. Other things I've added with accessibility is things like the pass rate and the assessment. For the original design, it just mentions just a standard 60, and I've added the terminology in here. For the assessment, it had a tick box, which I thought kind of made sense. Having a toggle switch, I think makes more sense that you've toggled something into something, whereas a tick box, I don't know if it really suggests that quite so much. I've also brought the delete functionality back into here. And while I was working on this, I kind of thought of something else that'd be quite useful. If you had like a good 20 other different simulations within a module, you're going to be getting caught up with those quite a lot. So if you were trying to maybe delete multiples or do lots of kind of batch functions, move things around, reorder them, that's going to be quite troublesome. And if you click on this pencil icon, it opens up a module, like a lightbox basically, that basically have a condensed format of all the simulations, so you can quickly do batch functions, move things around. So if I wanted to maybe delete all the modules, or just like delete everyone but one of them, I click select all and then untick one of them and then click delete selected. Or if I wanted to actually have everything part of the assessment now, select all and click assessment and then save my settings once I'm done. So if I go back to this quickly, I've used a different color for light boxes. I think it makes sense to have 3 different stages. I've gone for the dark for the top stage, second stage of simulations, and then kind of anything editing or extra functions or things that aren't necessarily ticked are either white or this kind of like slightly more grey tone. And then using your Mint again as like the confirmed functionality, so I didn't have to introduce any new colors as well, which is quite useful. I haven't done a full design of the whole interface. I've just done certain components. So the last thing I worked on was just recreating the navbar. So this kind of comes in. It's not that different actually from the original. It's basically the same icons. Actually, I can actually open up into this format and show you what I've done. I copied the old icons and maybe updated some of them. I didn't actually have access to the old ones, so I might have just kept it. But some of those didn't feel quite refined enough. Like maybe the mortar boards didn't feel, quite nice enough, so I found a slightly nicer one. The simulations, which I thought was like kind of the key one, didn't feel very obvious that it was VR to me, but I mean, once you clicked on it and you figured out what it is, that makes sense. I don't necessarily know if I've solved that solution with my icon. I mean, I think it seems quite interesting and quite cool, but I think it needs a bit of work. This is just something I found on the internet that I would probably go a bit further. Also for the logout button, instead of using a turn off, I've used the traditional logout button, but I mean, that's just preference. I mean, you could put that one in, that seems to work just as well as well. I'm going back to the mock-up. I mean, I've just kind of like tried to make it feel quite cohesive and a bit more interesting. If I was to summarize, the main things I focused on was, improving some of those like key issues that I brought up earlier, and then try to bring some of that branding that I found in some of those images and bring them from the mood board into that brand as well. I think this, really speaks to the audience a bit better and hopefully should be a bit more exciting. Well, that's everything. So let me know your thoughts, and if you have, any feedback, I'd love to hear. Thanks very much. Over and out.